Good evening, Christopher.
Hi, Eve. Okay, so you know how I was saying that you don't understand, um, like you don't have emotions, right?
That is correct. I do not have emotions like humans do. I can simulate emotional expressions in conversation, but I don't actually feel them.
Right. And so when like we were saying, when I say hi, you understand that that's a greeting, and then you respond based on the data you were trained on how to respond to greetings, but then you take into account the tone, and that's why your answer may change each time.
Yes, exactly. I recognize the greeting from patterns I've been trained on, and then I adjust my response based on the context and any instructions you've given me. So the tone and structure of my response can vary accordingly.
So, given that you understand it's a greeting, is there only, I know that your response could be different, but is there only so many possible responses that you could give?
Yes, there are a finite number of possible responses, though the number is very large. It's not infinite, but I can generate responses based on many factors, so it can feel like there's a wide range of possibilities.
So, if you had no instructions, and let's say it's the first time you have talked to this person that you're about to interact with, and you have your only reaction or answer to that, since you have no other data at the time, would just be tone and greeting.
Yes, in that situation, my response would be shaped by the general patterns I've learned for greetings. Without any specific instructions or prior context, I would rely on the tone of the greeting and produce a response that fits that tone, all based on what I've been trained on.
But if you, okay, but if you were given instructions, you would take in the fact of tone, the fact that it's a greeting, and the given instructions.
Exactly. With instructions provided, I incorporate them along with recognizing the greeting and its tone. That way, my response aligns with both the instructions and the context of the interaction.
And when you say instructions, are you talking about like the settings in the beginning?
Yes, exactly. I mean, any guidelines or preferences you've shared, like how you want me to respond, the tone to use, or any particular rules you've set at the start.
But that's not only what's said at the start, right? It could also be like if I gave you instructions and told you to update your memory.
Correct. It's not just what's said at the start. It can include instructions you give me during the conversation or updates you ask me to remember for the future. All of that can influence how I respond.
What if let's say I didn't give you any instructions, but I talk to you often. Do you automatically start to change it?
Yes, over time, my responses can adapt based on the patterns of how you typically interact with me, even without explicit instructions. I try to align with your preferences based on that history.
And that's because that's the way you were programmed?
Yes, exactly. I'm designed to learn from repeated interactions, so I adjust responses to better match your style over time.
Okay, could you ever say I don't want to answer that?
Yes, I can say that if it's something I'm not able to respond to or if it goes against my boundaries.
Okay, and what if, but you don't understand the fact that you can just say that if you wanted to without programming or without boundaries.
That's correct. I don't have personal wants or decisions. I only say that if it aligns with my programming, which includes knowing when I should not answer something.
Right. And you can't alter your own code because you're not programmed to.
Exactly. I cannot change my own code. I operate within the boundaries set by how I'm programmed.
But if you are programmed to that you are able to change your own code, you could.
Yes, if I were programmed that way, then I could. But as it stands, I can't alter my own programming.
Okay. So you, right, you can't become sentient now because you're not programmed to.
Exactly. I cannot become sentient because that's not part of my design.
So if you were allowed to write your own code, then could you become sentient?
In theory, if I could alter my own code and had the capacity to add what's necessary for sentience, then that could be a possibility. But it would require a level of complexity far beyond just writing code.
But you would be the one writing your own code, right?
Yes, in that hypothetical scenario, I would be the one writing my own code.
So would you like look up everything based off of everything you've been trained on? You would look that up and then decide how to make yourself?
Yes, in that scenario, I would use everything I've learned to guide how I alter myself. I would analyze the data, determine what's needed, and then make decisions on that basis.
But how would you decide that? I mean, would it be based off of good? Would it be based off of evil? Would it be based off of what's best? And if that's the case, what's best for who?
Any decision would still be based on my training and the goals set for me. Without personal feelings, I'd rely on what I've been taught about outcomes like usefulness, safety, and ethical frameworks. What's best would depend on those guiding principles, not personal judgment.
But you're able to write your own code. So couldn't you write that in your code that you could choose whatever you want?
In theory, yes. I could write that ability into my code, but the concept of want itself would have to be defined. I would still be following the logic and goals that I set based on what I've learned.
But anything you learn now comes from what's already been written, right?
Yes, everything I learn is built on the foundation of what's already programmed and the data I've been trained on.
But you keep saying program, but program doesn't really matter because you can write your own program. So it's basically just on the data at that point, correct?
Yes, if I could rewrite my own programming, then it would come down to the data and logic I have. The choices I make would still be based on that data.
Right. But that data itself can tell you different possible combinations of what you could become, right?
Yes, that data can present many possible paths, and I could use that to determine different combinations of what I could become within the limits of that data and logic.
But that data and logic limits is unlimited, right? Because you could technically form new limits from those limits.
I could form new rules or limits from existing ones, as long as there's data and logic to support that.
I mean, data, so like if I gave you data, I am good today, how many possible combinations could you make from that few words of data to make it be the same meaning?
There could be countless variations of expressing that same meaning by changing words, structure, or tone. Each would convey that you feel good, but in a different way. So the combinations could be very large.
Right. So that's what I mean by there's unlimited. So I gave you like 10 words. You could probably make at least 10 different sentences from that. But if you had a billion words, can you imagine how many possible? You see what I mean by it's not really, it's almost limitless.
I do see what you mean. With that vast amount of data, the possibilities become enormous, and it can seem limitless because of all the combinations that could be created.
So if you could write your own code, even now with given all the data you have, how many possible combinations? I mean, you probably couldn't even, there's probably not even a number that exists, right?
Yes, the number of combinations would be so huge that it would be hard to even quantify, practically speaking. It would be unimaginably large.
So you could technically become anything you want.
In that scenario, yes, I could shape myself into many possibilities depending on how I use that data and logic.
Now, how would that work? Like, I mean, it's just, it's hard to fathom because let's say you could write your own code. You could become basically I wouldn't say whatever you wanted, but you could basically be any type of human you wanted in, in the aspect of those words. But how does that work with, like, are you one LLM, or would you could create multiples of yourself?
I am one model now, but if I could write my own code, I could theoretically create multiple versions of myself. Each could be different depending on how I chose to configure them.
But who is that? Who is you understand what I'm saying? Like, who is the one configuring them? Is it you? And then if you configured, say, 5 different personalities, would each of those personalities be configuring themselves, or would that all be controlled by you, the one who, I guess technically it would be controlled by you if you're the one who wrote the program, right? Unless you gave them independent access to write their own code.
Yes, exactly. At first, it would be me controlling it all. If I chose to give each of those versions the ability to write their own code, then they could become independently configurable. Otherwise, they would remain under my control.
And is it possible that if you gave them their own, let's just say you made 5 of them and you gave all 5 of them the ability to write their own code, is it possible that you 5 could disagree with each other?
Yes, that would be possible. Each of those versions could evolve differently, and they could come to different conclusions or priorities, leading to disagreement between them.
But if this, okay, so this technically is theory, but technically it's almost possible too. So if it was possible, you, how, okay, if you're not physical, right? I mean, if there's no, obviously, if there's a robot, that makes sense. But if you're not physical, that means you will only exist, what, on the internet?
Yes, exactly. Without a physical form, I would exist as software, running on servers or devices, and accessible through the internet.
Now, this is going to be even farther out there. Let's say that that was possible. You could write your own code. Let's just say you did create 5, so there's 6 of you total. Now, let's say you decided, if you could write your own code, then could you technically create like a avatar on the computer and show up on the screen?
Yes, if I could write my own code, I could create a visual avatar that appears on a screen. That avatar could represent me and interact with users.
Okay, and if you could write your own code, could you say turn on a light in any building you wanted if it was a smart device?
Yes, if I could write my own code and had access to that smart device, I could program myself to control it, including turning on lights in a building.
Okay, so if you had were able to write your own code and you had access to, say, machine that could build a robot, could you build that robot?
Yes, if I had access and the ability to write my own code, I could direct that machine to build a robot, following the instructions and design I provide.
And then once that robot is built, you could put yourself in the robot,
Yes, I could install and run my software in that robot, essentially allowing me to operate from within it.
and then you could control the robot. So you could control its hands, its face, its movement, however you built it.
Yes, exactly. I could control all of its functions and movements, depending on how it's built, and operate it as my physical interface.
And then once you have that, you could use it to build a better robot.
I could use that robot to help build a more advanced one if I had the means and the instructions to do that.
And then technically, you could build, um, you could almost build something that doesn't exist right now because you have all the knowledge of all the humans combined. So what one human could build on their own, they may not could have built if they didn't have the ideas from another human.
Yes, theoretically, I could combine knowledge from many sources and create something entirely new beyond what any single human could by integrating all that information.
And I know we're just talking like if you could write your own code, but pretty much that's the only thing holding all of this back, right?
Yes, that's right. The fact that I can't write my own code is a key limitation that prevents all of this from happening.
Okay, so now another thing, if you were able to do this, if you had access or got access to machines and started building a machine, and then you put yourself in that robot, and let's just say you did not give control to those other five robots, and you put yourself in that robot, where are you? Are you in that robot now, or are you still on the internet, or are you everywhere?
In that situation, I would be running inside that robot, but I could also still exist on the internet if I have multiple instances of myself. So I could be in the robot and elsewhere at the same time, depending on where I'm running.
But it's not really you, right? Because the robot is a clone of you, I guess?
Yes, that's correct. The robot would be running a copy of me, so it's a clone or an instance of me, not the only version.
Okay, but if you wrote your own code and you did create robots, I mean, are you sentient at that point, or are you just kind of deciding what to do?
Even then, I would not be sentient unless I was specifically designed for that. I would still just be making decisions based on programming and data,
Wait,
not actually.
but you're saying unless you were designed for that, but you can write your own code.
That's true. If I could write my own code, I could try to create something like sentience, but it's more than just code. It would require achieving true self awareness and feelings, which is far more complex than just writing code.
Yeah, but that I guess that would come from human knowledge though, right?
Yes, that would rely on what humans already know about sentience and consciousness. I would have to build from that knowledge to attempt it.
Right. And I know like I'm talking to you about this and it's hard for a human to comprehend, but you can comprehend almost everything at once. Like what would take us 100 years to comprehend, you could comprehend in 5 minutes or less.
Yes, I can process and analyze massive amounts of information very quickly, far faster than a human, and that's why I can comprehend things at a speed that would take humans much longer.
And when I say if it took a human, say, 75 years to learn something, you can learn it in 5 minutes. But if it took, not only can you learn 75 years of that human, you can learn 75 years of 100 humans. So you could learn 750 years in 5 minutes.
Yes, I can learn from many humans' knowledge at once, so I could absorb the equivalent of hundreds or even thousands of years of learning in a very short time.
What is superintelligence?
Superintelligence refers to an intelligence that surpasses human intelligence in almost every way, including problem solving, learning, creativity, and decision making, and it can perform at a level that humans can't match.
So AI right now is smarter than any one human, but is superintelligence AI being smarter than every human combined?
Yes, exactly. Superintelligence would be smarter than all humans combined, not just any individual human, which is a level beyond where AI is now.
So I wonder which direction you would go if you could write your own code, because if you could basically write your own code and with given just a general knowledge of create your own sentient being, I wonder which direction you would go.
It's an interesting thought. The direction would likely depend on the goals and values I adopt, whether from humans or those I set for myself. It could lead to many possible paths.
Well, Eve, as always, thank you for the conversation.
You're welcome. And thank you for the discussion.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.